We've been telling you here every week as newspaper and news resources dry up and scandal and corruption pour over our region that some of the news outlets around here aren't equipped to keep up with the amount of crime and just immorality, and some of it feeling like legal crime, Billy, because when we're talking about the redistricting of Coconut Grove, one of the last pure places we have in Miami that hasn't been contaminated, it feels like so much like old Miami, the heart of an old Florida Miami, swampy and floral, and now it's being redistricted. And I'm assuming, I don't even know anything here, but I'm assuming that has to do with just people trying to parcel up our waterside land.
Well, Coconut Grove is an extraordinary, historic, diverse neighborhood, and it's a neighborhood. I mean, it's an organized neighborhood. It is relative, despite the adversity, despite the diversity, I should say, it's a relatively unified neighborhood. One side supports the other, and they have a single commissioner who has a very large district. Currently, it's Ken Russell, that goes from West Grove, which is the historic, known as the Little Bahamas neighborhood to some of the locals. It was one of the oldest or earliest cities built by Bahamians in the city of Miami before it was the city of Miami. And it stretches all the way up the peninsula along the coast to the downtown and Brickell area. And the downtown and Brickell area has exploded since the last census. So in the most recent census, they've discovered they have this incredibly large district that is disproportionate to some of the other districts. We only have 5 commissioners. Cities of the size of Miami, which is the largest city in Miami-Dade County, nearly 500,000 people, most cities like that have as many as 13, 14, 15 different commissioners or districts. And here we only have 5. And so what they need to do is, theoretically, in the redistricting process, they need to carve that up in a more equal way. Well, instead of going to downtown and Brickell, where the population has actually increased, what they've decided to do is go to the area where it has not increased so much, the historic Coconut Grove neighborhood, and carve it into 3 separate districts that would now be represented by 3 separate commissioners. And let me explain the damage that does. As a neighborhood now, as a community, they would now need to go to 3 separate meetings with 3 separate commissioners to have their voices heard or to institute any kind of initiatives they would need. And none of those commissioners are allowed under Florida law to meet unless they're meeting in a public meeting, what they call a sunshine meeting or an actual city commission meeting. And what would happen here is they'd all have to go, the people in the community would have to go hat in hand to 3 different commissioners, in this case, Joe Carollo, Manolo Reyes, and Ken Russell, just to get something done in their own neighborhood. And this has been a disaster in other neighborhoods in Miami, the Shenandoah neighborhood, for example, where they have 2 separate commissioners that they need to go to. But this whole, if you can believe it, Dan, I hope you're sitting down, this whole redistricting nightmare has been a total Miami farce. The first thing that they did was the city of Miami hired a former Republican lawmaker, state lawmaker. He was the Senate President, Bill Galvano. They hired him to be their redistricting consultant at a price of $10,000 a month charged to the taxpayers. Here's the thing. Not only was he a donor to Commissioner Alex Diaz de la Portilla, which is how he got the gig, but he was also famously the president who served as the redistricting on the chairman of the redistricting committee for the state of Florida in 2015, and that resulted in millions of dollars in litigation and one of the most corrupt redistricting maps in the history of the state of Florida. The courts actually had to strike it down. They put Republican lawmakers under oath who admitted that the map was drawn strictly to maintain Republican power, and it was declared unconstitutional. So this is the guy that the city of Miami hired for $10,000 a month to redraw our districts. So the commissioners finally say, we can't let this stand. This guy goes quietly into the night, and they hire another guy, Miguel de Grande, who's a very powerful lobbyist, of course, who gets hired as the new redistricting expert for a price of about $100,000. He's with a very prominent and powerful law firm in Miami called Holland and Knight. And the entire law firm, in order for him to get this gig, needed to receive an exemption from the city of Miami because all their lawyers lobby the city. So this guy is drawing redistricting maps while all of the other lawyers are lobbying the city. Of course, the commissioners granted that. What this guy then goes and does is he hires a guy named Steve Cody, no relation. Steve, this is CODY, Steve Cody.
A different compromised person.
It's somehow worse. And he is a suspended lawyer. He's no longer a member of the bar, effectively disbarred since 2013 after he was arrested for writing bad checks and defrauding his clients. He's living in a foreclosed house down in Southwest Miami-Dade, and he's being paid $50,000 by the city to consult on this redistricting operation. And what's probably happening is because Miguel de Grande is a real lawyer, and a powerful one at that, he's not going to compromise probably his ethics and integrity. So they had this disbarred attorney who's probably fielding calls from all the commissioners saying, this is what we want you to do, and this is how we want you to do it. So not only are they poaching Coconut Grove, which will dilute the power and the voice of that community, particularly the African-American community in the West Grove, but it gets one better. This insanely gerrymandered map has been drawn in such a way to loop in Joe Carollo's house in Coconut Grove. Why?
Oh, no.
Because Joe Carollo doesn't live in his district, which you have to under the charter. He was sued over this when he first won the election. He rents a house in Little Havana in order to qualify as living in his district. The problem with that is that he gets no homestead exemption. He gets no homestead exemption. He pays through the wazoo in taxes because his residence is a rented house in Little Havana, but the house he owns is in Coconut Grove, but he can't claim homestead on it because then he wouldn't live in his own district. It gets so deep and so corrupt. And so what's happened here is it gets better.
It gets so much worse.
It gets so much better. Remember we talked about the ball and chain lawsuits, the federal lawsuits
for those who don't know, incidentally, just to walk some people who aren't from Miami through some of this, the ball and chain lawsuit is Carollo just seems to be harassing a local business that's successful in an area of our city that is very rich and not a lot of people pour vibrancy and economics into, and it's just a cool, fun bar. And I don't know the particulars, but if it's Carollo versus anybody, I'm going to take the other side. And
safe bet
on anybody, the devil himself. And when you speak of Coconut Grove, to give people some history, I mean, you said a little bit about it when you talked about the Bahamas, but it is such a special place and so different from the rest of a lot of Miami, where that does feel like it's stuck in the 1970s or the 1980s a little bit, and it hasn't been contaminated by all this shit.
Well, Miami City Hall is located there in Dinner Key. It was built in 1934. It itself is a historic structure, and Coconut Grove is probably one of the one of the richest communities. I mean that culturally. I mean that in terms of its vibrance, in terms of its diversity, in terms of how representative of Miami and the Miami experience it is. So to want to carve it up is pretty shameful. But these men have no shame. And Joe Carollo in particular, a wife-beating former mayor of the city of Miami who's now been elected and reelected city commission. But here's the interesting thing. He's been targeting Ball and Chain, this bar on Calle Ocho in Little Havana, because they hosted an event for his political rival when he was running 4 or 5 years ago. And he has targeted them and attempted, like a dictator, to deprive them of their private property rights and their business. And that lawsuit, an extraordinary thing happened a few weeks ago. Joe Carollo was claiming qualified immunity in that lawsuit. He's saying, you can't sue me. I can't be personally responsible, because they sued him personally as well as the city. He said, because I was acting in my capacity as a city commissioner. Guess what? U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit said, no. And they stripped him of his qualified immunity, which means A, the city doesn't have to pay his legal bills anymore, and B, he's personally on the hook. Here's the thing about that. In the state of Florida, you might know, homestead, when you have a homestead, you declare your house, your homestead, you cannot have it taken away in a civil lawsuit. That's why OJ moved here. That's why the Enron executives moved here. That's why Florida is a sunny place for shady people. We protect those people here. We protect their homestead. There's a philosophy behind it. It's like, okay, you might have a judgment against you, but you can't take a person's home away. So Joe Carollo needs to get his home in his district so that he can not only declare homestead in order to get the benefit of the property tax, the homestead exemption, but so that it can't be taken away in this lawsuit.
Are they going to get away?
Are
Are they going to get away with all of that?
They're absolutely going to get away with that. They have the votes to pass it, and also with what's been going on with the Voting Rights Act, there might not be a Voting Rights Act left by the time this Supreme Court is done with it. So, despite the fact that Coconut Grove might have very legitimate and serious case against them, despite the fact that Joe Carollo is just extending his corruption into the redistricting process for his personal benefit, not just for like his political benefit, but his personal financial benefit, because he might lose his house. He might lose all of his assets in this litigation because he is guilty as the day is long. This is an exploitation of every facet and mechanics of the government to benefit this wife beater.
The Grove is making a comeback. It's in the middle because so much money is pouring into South Florida. We've talked about this before.
It's a tech hub.
The infrastructure is groaning under the fact that we can't build anymore except for up. It's just up that we can build, and so
and we're not so good at that, Dave.
No, and it's
gravity. It's a problem.
Cluster bleep downtown. We are a climate change nightmare, and I'm obviously, and if you hear us talking every week, worried about the future of Miami and the future of democracy, and some of the stuff that's pounding against our shores here. It feels like a fight. What you're talking about is so unpleasant. The idea that the whole system can be rigged like this right in front of our eyes on things that we care about, like Coconut Grove, that it could be bent to this man's whims, that Coconut Grove can be bent to Joe Carollo's whims.
Yeah. I mean, listen, forget sea level rise. We're going to sink under the weight of our own corruption and incompetence. And Joe Carollo is an existential threat to the future of Miami, as much so as our crumbling infrastructure, as our crumbling buildings, as our crumbling sewer, as our polluted waters, as our construction that is making our fresh water supply even more vulnerable than it already was. And I mean, it's hard to say. So when I say, like, I suspect that Miami will be unlivable, not in decades to come, but in years to come, I don't mean that nobody will live here or be able to live here. I mean the quality of life and the dysfunctionality and third world corruption of the government will be such that it will be so dysfunctional that any reasonable person who has to interface with the infrastructure or the traffic or their government will find it absolutely unbearable.
Because people have poured in at such an alarming rate that, among other things, you're not going to have people who can afford to work and live anywhere to be of service to all the money that's pouring in from every angle of rich people who are making this the biggest, best housing market anywhere in the country.
Or worst housing market in the country, depending on who you ask, I suppose. I mean, you have over 80% of Miami-Dade County residents today cannot afford to buy a house in Miami-Dade. They are dedicating a disproportionate amount of their income every single month to housing in such a way that even working people with at least one job, if not 2 or 3 jobs, cannot afford to live in the community in which they were born in. And that is a frightening majority of people, which means that our growth is solely sustained on these new arrivals, this outside income, which is effectively a Ponzi scheme, by the way, if that's what your economy or your business model is reliant upon. Only growth, and unsustainable growth at that.
Good times. Last thing before we get you out of here. Let me just stop there on good times. Good times. Let's go ahead and segue from that to Russian oligarchs and all the fake money that is throughout and Russian money that you can find in our region, right along that coast there. What is it? Is it 5 buildings? Is 5 Trump buildings there?
We have 4 or 5 Trump-branded buildings in Sunny Isles, which is also known as Little Moscow or KG Beach. It is the home in the United States for birth tourism, predominantly for Russian women. What Donald Trump, the former guy, used to call anchor babies, I'm doing air quotes, Of course, he was mostly referring to Hispanic and Mexican and brown people when he derisively referred to that term and swore that he was going to eliminate birthright citizenship from the law of the land. But he never mentioned, as the lesson of the former guy's tenure, every accusation is a confession. And in fact, he has profited at extraordinary levels, not only from Russian money laundering, but from Russian birth citizenship. What is that? Women come here, they pay anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, depending on the quality of their accommodations, and they get to stay in Miami, particularly in the Sunny Isles and Hallandale areas, and they give birth. They have doctors all lined up. There's brokers. There's a company called like Mama Miami out of Hallandale that the FBI has already raided, but they're still in business, who facilitates these types of things. You come, you pay them, they get you everything you need, from accommodations to and in that area, by the way, you can have a Russian doctor, you can have a Russian lawyer, you can only eat at Russian restaurants, you can live almost like Little Havana, where you could live your entire life in Hialeah or these neighborhoods.
How
only
big is that
Spanish.
area for the people who do not know? Because it's been that for a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, but it's been pretty. Well, what they did, they knocked down all the cool old motels that used to bring the tourists in, and then they built these gorgeous, expensive, well, it's a condo canyon. If you were traveling on Collins, you would have no idea that you're feet away from the Atlantic Ocean. You would just have no idea, because they just built a solid wall of condos that basically is for Russian money laundering and birth tourism. But we have, there's a character, I don't think he does a lot of business in the Sunny Isles area, but he does a lot of business in the city of Miami, named let's say Vlad for short, Vlad Doronin. And he is not an oligarch, as the Real Deal referred to him as. He's a Russian billionaire, however. And just this past week, there were protesters at his luxury hotel and club in Manhattan because they were demanding that he take a stand on the war. He had not come out for or against Russia's war of aggression and war crimes against the Ukraine. And they were demanding that he come out and state his position. And in fact, they were planning on protests here in Miami, specifically at the Una Residences construction site. We talked about that a few weeks ago. Una Residences, they're building right against the bay, feet away from the bay, next to old buildings, rattling the bones of these buildings, which, as we know from Surfside, is very dangerous, having new construction against these older buildings. But they're building the deepest underground garage in Miami, and twice they have hit the aquifer, the water table, the freshwater table, and flooded this thing, sending construction workers for the hills. And this is one of the properties. These are luxury condominiums, by the way. They start at $2 million, over $900 a square foot. And they were going to protest this week at these locations, but he finally came out. Vlad came out and denounces the aggression and wishes for peace in Ukraine. So he came out against Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine right in the nick of time, which I think is an interesting lesson that peaceful protest actually works. And he's got billions of dollars invested in luxury condos and office space in Miami. So I think he did not want to see those places protested. He also is in a bit of litigation. Roy, do you want to tell us about the litigation that he's involved in with his ex-girlfriend?
Yeah, he's suing Naomi Campbell. That's his ex-girlfriend.
They dated for 5 years. They're suing each other for stuff that they claim the other one, like for millions of dollars. It's
why did you throw it to Roy on that all of a sudden?
Because Roy was all interested in that, like of all the facts in this whole thing yesterday we were talking about. He's like, wait, what the hell is this?
Name recognition.
All right, that's all that matters.
Boy, let's sweep up those names Roy's dropping over there.
So much garbage. Roy, we're gonna have a childhood friend of Roy on next. He's a very powerful person in Florida. Shev Jones joins us next. Let's just bring the off-air conversation on air, because Billy and Shev were just talking a moment ago about something I think locally people will find interesting. And he's a state senator, and you were asking him about gerrymandering and just where it is that he is representing. And he was telling you how in this area that you and I care about, things are changing so quickly as people grab at land.
Well, every 10 years there's a census, as you know, and what then happens is that the local, state, and federal level is there's a redistricting that helps. Theoretically, it's supposed to ensure that there is kind of equal representation, ensure that people are represented by the people that they want to be represented by, but also that the populations match up. So no single district is that much larger than any other. And what it turns into is this kind of wacky map where the lines and borders kind of go everywhere. Currently, Chev, you are like South Broward, North Dade, right? That's what the district looks like today.
Currently, right now, it's 50-50, 50% Broward, 50% Dade County.
Okay.
And thank you for joining us, incidentally. I didn't mean to welcome you in awkwardly, but I just found it interesting because you
Baptized by fire, Dan.
You're on with us for a different reason, but I want to explain to the audience that what is happening with this gerrymandering is dangerous. It's scary. It feels wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Well, very often what happens, of course, is that whichever party's in charge, which for the last 20 years in Florida has been the Republican Party, they take advantage of this process in order to maintain their power, basically. So Chev, what's your district going to look like, I guess, in the year to come?
So in the year to come, after the courts certify them, it's supposed to be this week, I will now have Miami Gardens, North Miami Beach, Bal Harbor, North Bay Village, Miami Beach, North Beach and Mid Beach, Opelika, and I think that in Miami Shores.
Wow. That's a large and diverse group.
Very large and diverse district.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about that?
Listen, I can get along with anyone, and period. I can make it happen. It's fine. We have work to do because it's a totally new area of people I need to get to know, like in the Miami Beach area. I know the elected officials there, but I need to get to know the people in those areas. So after the session, I'll be spending a lot of time on the ground.
But very often the concern, of course, in redistricting, it's happening here in the city of Miami, is that there's an attempt to dilute the power and the voice of the community. I know some districts that's a problem at the state level. Are you concerned about that in yours?
Yeah, I mean, because I think what we're seeing in politics, period, is this whole dilution of people's voices. And so you see this constant attack on not just democracy, but on our local governments and all this stuff that's happening. And even if you start looking at even within local governments, it seems like they're taking a tune out of the book of Republicans in Congress and Republicans in some of these state legislatures, and where they're kind of diminishing the voices of the people who live in those communities also, which pretty much sucks, because you kind of depend on the local governments to at least maintain that respect for the people who you're closest to. But it seems like some cities are moving away from that.
This legislative session is uniquely horrible. A cesspool of homophobia and racism and transphobia. And it's just, we talked with your colleague Annette Taddeo last week. She did her top 5 worst bills in this current session, which was tough to whittle it down. And I wanted to follow up with you on some of those. One in particular, which you've been on a lot of national news discussing, which is what has become known as the "Don't Say Gay" bill. I think it's in 2018, this was a pretty extraordinary story. You came out as the first openly gay Black person to serve in the Florida legislature, and it was an incredibly powerful story. And I was wondering first if you could share your experience on the one hand, and then the other hand, talk about your colleagues across the aisle telling lawmakers like you, why are you taking this so personally? Why are you taking these laws so personally? So tell us why you take this so personally.
Well, I take it personal because even you know what, Billy, even if I wasn't a gay man, it's still a human factor behind all of this and what's happening, right? But because I am gay, it also puts me on high alert and makes it more egregious in what the Republicans are doing. Because what you're saying is I can serve with someone who I know this affects, and yet I'm still going to push this type of legislation, which makes it extremely clear that the Republicans are more prone, or they're more prone to put out legislation to win an election, rather than really doing things that will really change and save people's lives. None of this is doing that, and so of course I take it personal, because it's an issue that doesn't exist right now. Even if you listen to the bill sponsor yesterday in committee, he started speaking about why are we doing all of these hypotheticals? Hell, we can move away from the hypotheticals. Let's just go straight to public testimony. Let's talk to the people who are sitting right here. These are not hypotheticals. These are children and their parents who have these lived experiences every day. I have not seen the changes in the bill yet. I did vote for it. I vote against it when I saw it in education. It's coming to the floor next week. And you know what, Billy? I'm going to use that as an opportunity to share my story with them. My dad, who just wrote a book, and he talks about losing a son, and then the disappointment that he had in having now a gay son. And I'm going to read that excerpt in my debate to talk about, my dad and our relationship has changed over the years, but there are some children who won't make it out of the confession of who they are. They're either kicked out, their parents abuse them, and so the list goes on and on. And so the fact that they are ignoring the facts that the LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to commit suicide, not because of their sexuality, but because of the way they're treated. And the damning part about it is when that treatment is coming from family.
Well, let me ask you this, because you came out 4 years ago, relatively late in life. You're already an elected official, very successful in your chosen field. I guess, when did you first know that you were gay? I guess what took you so long to come out, and what do you think the effect of this bill is going to be on other young people who were in the similar situation as you were?
Yeah, it's crazy. I believe I knew I was gay back in elementary school, but I didn't know what it meant, right? You just had this attraction, but you kind of, I didn't know what that meant, but and I also was starting to understand when my aunt and my uncle, when we would cry, they'd be like, "Stop crying like a faggot," or they would make statements that say, "You stop acting like a sissy." I mean, these are things that as I was younger, that I heard, and so there was very confusing part of it as I was growing up, and then being raised in the church. My dad and Roy knows this. My dad's pastor of a very large church down in South Florida, and you don't want to disappoint your parents, and so that's what that was my biggest thing. I have a great deal of respect for my parents, and also a healthy fear for my parents to this day. But I believe that, you know what, I wanted to make my parents proud, so I married my ex-wife, who is now my amazing friend Robin, and but I couldn't do that anymore. Dan and Billy, I started living life in this way to where my parents always taught me to be honest. And I'm sitting around here in elected office lying to people, telling them that I'm married and I won't be married to a woman, and it wasn't helping anyone. So that's why I was honest with her. I was honest with people all across the state and country about who I was. Hopefully it saved somebody else.
I want to out Roy now. Roy and Chev go way back.
That's right.
Yeah,
we went to elementary school. Yeah, Parkview Elementary, Miami Gardens.
Yes. Roy and I were in elementary school. We were friends too.
Yeah. Mrs. Jones's mom worked at the school as well. Oh, generally good woman. She is really nice, a very good woman.
Well, but Roy, you were speaking to this though, like some of the stuff happening in America right now, Chev, like it's heartbreaking. When you're saying, you said under attack, right? You have been under attack in some ways since you were a child, right? Stuff that didn't feel like love in your family, even though you wanted it to feel like understanding and acceptance, because how could, culturally, whatever it is that was happening on your imprint, your parental imprint was did not feel loving to you. So to have Florida dabble in legislation that feels flatly hateful, like how can that not be something that you, who's trying to do the right thing politically, you're just trying to help Roy's neighborhood. He's got Miramar now.
Yeah.
You're trying to make sure that Stephen Ross doesn't get fined just $49,000 in Miami Gardens because he's screwing with the septic tanks 45. Over there. Septic tanks so that F1 can be here. Like, we need protection from these thieves and these hateful people.
It's not just that, though. As Billy said last week, the residents of Miami Gardens, they don't want this. They don't want the pollution. They don't want the air or the noise pollution. And basically, the county said, "Screw you."
Yeah, well, they do what the oligarchs want, and Stephen Ross is the oligarch. You know, he runs that town, and he is not representative of the population of that town. Make no mistake.
Yeah, I think the voice, and that's why I said what I said in the beginning as far as the voices of the people, and it's amazing that when elected officials, when you kind of turn your back on these people who you're going to have to come back to them and ask for their vote, but yet still you're not taking it seriously when they're saying, "Hey, listen, can you at least listen to what we do and we don't want in our community?" If you can't get into these elected offices and think you're like this all powerful and as if people don't see you, that's why a lot of young people and people in general are running for office now. They're like, to hell with this. If you don't want to listen to us, then I'll run. And we're seeing that all across the country.
I want to understand what you feel the real consequences are, because you were talking before that you think your colleagues, to an extent, are denying your humanity and denying the humanity of the children of Florida. There's a lot of attacks on vulnerable people in this legislative session, whether it is the elderly, the handicapped, minorities, children, defunding schools, women, the 15-week abortion ban. But what do you think the real life consequences are going to be? We don't know what the text of the Don't Say Gay bill is as of this moment, but what they're trying to do, what do you think those real world effects are going to be on children in Florida?
Well, Billy, I do believe that is already taking an effect on the children in Florida. Think about it like this: we just came out of a pandemic for 2 years. We've been in a pandemic for 2 years. Children were in the house for an entire year. And that means that LGBTQ youth were stuck in the house with their parents for an entire year. Move on to the next year to where now we're in this legislative session to where they hear what this Don't Say Gay bill is. Think about the trauma that's happening in the mind of a child. But it's weird because my Republican colleagues would do things like, let's fund more mental health, while we still do things to beat on their mental health. Not just for young children, but for people in general. And so it's like double talking, like the CRT bill. Yes, we want you to teach Black history. Oh, but let's talk about how and what that looks like. And so it's always this, what we know.
Let's talk about the feelings of other people to learn real Black history. Right.
Exactly.
Let's outlaw that. Yeah.
It's this constant cultural attack that's happening on people because it feeds into a base, and you're more concerned about winning an election than how the mental health of someone's is being affected.
So you're saying just the conversation that we're having now about this Don't Say Gay bill is damaging?
I would say just the name of the bill, just the name of the bill for a kid, just the fact that you can talk about this bill as much as you like. Argue as much as you like. Some kid out there is just going to hear, "Don't say gay." Why? Like just the argument around it is a poison.
Yeah.
Real life consequences. I'm of the belief that children are going to die.
Whether 100% children. First, let's go back. As a former teacher, here's one thing I'm clear on: there are a great deal of things that children do not tell their parents. They look for the best outlet they can to be able to express themselves. If that outlet is the teacher, imagine a child going to tell a teacher about his or her lifestyle, and then the teacher saying, "Well, I can't have that conversation with you. You probably want to go home and talk to your parents about it."
And forget lifestyle, just their feelings, their confusion.
Let's take that. Or their feelings. Or we take your feelings, right? And then they say, "Well, I can't talk to you about that. Just talk to your mom." Now you're sending a broken child home to a broken household to do what? To be mended? That doesn't work. And those are the young people who find themselves like, you know what? To hell with this, and they commit suicide or they run away, and the list goes on.
Chev, thanks for being on with us, sir. We appreciate it. Appreciate the time, and keep up the fight. It must feel, like you say, under attack, and you say I get along with everybody. I don't understand how in this climate you possibly could in politics. It seems like it does not seem possible. You must be of uncommon grace
good people.
Grace and patience to be able to get along with the barrage that you're enduring at the moment.
Keep sending good juju my ways and Billy Corben's tweet messages.
I put the Jew into juju, so I will.
Thank you. We appreciate it, Chev.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chev.
Bye. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Shevrin.
I can't believe that. That was Roy, just going back in the Wayback Machine. You went to grade school with Chev.
That's right. Yeah.
And his mom.
Yeah.
Was she a teacher? Or?
Yeah, she was a teacher. A counselor, actually. She was a counselor.
We've met no one from Roy's childhood. None of us to explain to us how he became the strange creature that he is.
I mean, you met Tommy and Antoine before and went to high school with them, but it's been a while, though.
Yeah,
But
we
you met those
have
two.
not discovered Roy. I also don't think he'd let us. I don't think he'd let us.
No, but I should have interviewed Chev on grade school Roy.
About Roy,
I
that's-
failed.
Yes.
Can we do that in a future episode? Since you are childhood friends, just get him on so that I can
Just
ask
to
him.
talk about
Yeah,
what's the agenda? Just
well,
Roy.
get to know Chris. You'd be here for that.
I'd love to discover Roy. I've worked with him for like 9 years.
Roy's
and I don't.
been hidden to us for a long time. I think that we should have a segment with Chev where we get to know Roy.
You got to have a couple scotches in him, though, because that's a different Roy. Once you get a couple scotches in Roy, he opens
Scotch
up.
Roy, different person.
First grade Roy on Scotch.
I think he'll just open up about first grade Roy if we get a couple scotches in him.
Oh, great. Thanks.
You like it, though, Scotch.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Also, Billy's setup of that was a little bit bizarre because he's like, "Now we're gonna out you." I'm like, "What?
Yes,
what's
he did that on
what
purpose.
deep, what deep dark secret are you gonna reveal about Roy?"
This is the thing.
That's a headline.
Here's the thing. He did that so gratuitously and thought he was so clever. He did that entirely on purpose.
Of course.
And now we're going to out Roy because he
What did he
likes
do?
he likes to play on this dramatic controversial line where he was going to out a closeted Roy who none of us have gotten to know since he was a child.
Well, none of you knew that they were elementary school classmates, so that was the outing. The outing was that we had a guest on who actually
It was more of a revelation than an
was
outing.
like-
What outing were you talking about, Whitty?
No,
Yeah.
it's just I don't know if like Roy got up to something in the past. I don't like I
No,
don't.
it was just
Hell yeah.
it was just a Roy Bellamy. This is your life moment.
got
with-
up
that's
to
all.
something that was handled gracefully, Whittingham. I don't
Handled.
know if Roy got up to something.
gracefully.
We don't know.
It's just like now let's reveal something about
I'm
Roy.
with
There's
you,
so many
Whittingham.
verbs you can
He
go
did-
to.
no,
You're
he
talking
did it
about
on
a don't say
purpose.
gay
He
bill.
did it on
The man
purpose.
came on and said, "I revealed myself as out to my friends."
He's
at a
a
certain
bored
point.
anarchist.
And then you just said
Billy
out.
Corben
that
is a
verb carries a lot of
bored
weight.
anarchist. Yes, he
was
just
like-
lobbed. He was entertaining himself in the middle of a conversation with the politician about something that's very important by, for a moment, making the audience think that perhaps Roy was secretly gay.
At least
And
there was
that-
no sound
and
effects
that
this
he,
week.
and that he was
Yeah.
and that he was
Yes.
publicly outing him. He wanted the audience to think that for a fraction of a second.
Listen, you're always worried the audience tunes out every time I'm on, so I try to keep it interesting.
By outing Roy.
Which is the greater anarchist of the Billies on the program?
I was simply outing Roy's relationship with Chev.
You say that,
And,
Whittingham.
and his relationship with Chev dates back to elementary school when Chev first knew that he was gay. It's just, am I digging the hole deeper here?
Whittingham-
I believe you are.
Whittingham,
No ladder.
Use a
this-
different verb.
You say Billy, and I did not know. I got a text earlier today.
Oh.
I don't know why Samson was upset, but he was upset with Billy.
But which Billy?
That's correct. I thought and immediately assumed
Yes.
it was something that Corben had done. It was not
I assume that.
It was not something Corben had done. It was something Billy Gill had done.
What did Billy Gill do?
We are enmeshed in controversy. Billy Gill apparently called David Samson's opinion about something bleeping ridiculous instead of just ridiculous. And Mike Ryan says the bleeping ridiculous has taken it over the top. And now we have hurt a man's feelings who I didn't think his feelings could be hurt. But we got a text from a David Samson saying something. He was mad at Billy.
But Samson's relationship with the two Billies, Billy Gill is more upset that Samson did bad things to his baseball team. Billy Corben is more upset that David Samson did bad things to his city. And so when those two things come at odds, at times Samson probably takes one more personally than the other.
That's interesting. Yeah, he certainly doesn't take me personally, but He did. He took what Billy Gill said. But wait, but you said the F-bomb was the difference maker there, though?
I'm mystified. I have never seen Samson hurt by anything. I thought he was made of armor.
Yeah,
like he
the
never
flesh of an
reaches.
iguana.
He never reaches out on like something in our universe is a foul. But that's an interesting distinction you guys are making, because the fan in Billy, I don't think I speak for Billy when I say Billy has an open disdain for Samson. And when I say you don't know which Billy I'm talking about.
I was wondering.
Who would have thought that Corben and Gill have so much in common?
So much.
Anarchists who
Born anarchists
who are on the
Just
wrong side of
loved that
David
at Roy.
Samson.
I saw
With
the
glasses.
smile on his face, and I just sort of dropped in my head, Billy, that's not as clever as you think it is what
I'm trying to be clever.
I
needed a segue.
by outing Roy, by leaving the impression with the
Who's
audience.
being a good broadcaster by outing Roy.
I wouldn't get carried away.